Hello creatives, welcome to a Kid Called Beast Maker session. In this session we have Zimmetry, and today we're diving into environment design. Here's an example of what we're making today. Let's get started.
Welcome everyone to today's maker session. I'm honored to be hosting you guys today, and I'm going to be teaching you some environment basics in Blender and this really awesome add-on called the A&T Landscape add-on. So we could jump right into it. The first thing you're going to need is to open up Blender and then go to Edit and Preferences, and then click your add-ons, and then just type in land, and the A&T Landscape add-on should pop right up. So this is a really powerful tool, and it's become one of my favorite add-ons lately. And then also we want to make sure the node wrangler is active too, because we're going to need that for texturing. So let's get started. And we're going to start like many tutorials, and we're going to select everything and pour one out for the dead cubes out there. And we're going to start with the Shift A mesh, and your landscapes should be right here now. And before you click on anything, you should get this little drop down menu right here. There's a lot to environment design, so I might try and speed through this, and I will try and explain things as I go with the environment that I'm going to be creating for you guys today. So before we mess with things, it's better to understand like what this add-on is doing. So the add-on is creating a displacement map in the form of a texture, and then taking that texture and displacing a mesh is what we're seeing here in real time. So if that doesn't make sense, or if you don't know what a displacement map is, you could download displacement maps of landscapes, and then there's always a displacement in textures. So it's where your white colors are your high points, and then your black colors are your low points, and then everything in between is calculated for you. So we are going to start with showing you guys that there's a bunch of presets in this that make everything super handy and quick to build environments. So you could build canyons real quick. There's canyons, there's cliffs, you can make dunes, you can make a lake, there's mesas, there's a bunch of different ones, and there's even not just environments. So you could use it to create your own rocks, you could create a planet even, and then there's even abstract and like technical stuff. So any hard surface and like industrial type textures, you can start messing with that. For us today, I'm going to start with Mountain 2 preset, and we're going to work on making our foreground piece. And it's a good idea to always have like reference or develop a reference board to be able to look at and see what you want to make. So this is a reference board I've made, and I have like mountains, highlands, oceans, glaciers, different cloud types in here, aurora borealis, deserts, and forescapes. And so for today, I was thinking we would mix a little bit of these. So we're gonna do almost, I really like the layout of this foreground here. I like how you can definitely tell the difference between your foreground, midground, and background. I really like the highlands, midground mountains. Like I love that they're all hazy in the background there, and then here too is a different color than your foreground. But then I also love the layering of forescape. So you got like your dead leaves, your trees, grass, flowers. So we're going to be mixing a lot of this stuff today. So back into Blender, you got 3 main settings in this add-on. There's main setting, which just adjusts the mesh, noise setting, which adjusts the noise, and then display setting, which adjusts the intensity of the texture onto the mesh. So let's just start with go in, if your computer's capable of doing it too, because this is going to create some like high density objects in your scene. So if your computer's capable of it, let's do subdivs of 256 and increase our mesh size to 4x4. So you can see the noise texture a little bit more on there. You could also adjust your noise types. This preset has it set for noise and terrain, which I've found very good too, because it's a mixture of two of the three main ones. So you got rigid, which would be more for like mountains or sharp landscapes. Hybrid, which is smoother. And then hetero, which is for like low hills or grasslands, kind of. So let's just set it back to our original preset, which was the noise and terrain. So I had my random seed set to 10. Kept my offset, and offset just moves the texture on the mesh right here, just to show you guys. And then size is the size of the noise texture, so you can stretch it out and adjust it that way. I made it to 1.3, and then this noise size here, I feel like it should really be called noise scale, but it's like the scale of, it's really the scale of the noise. So let's set that to a 1.2. And if you're thinking I'm getting these numbers out of nowhere, it's because I tried making this and I provided you guys some files too in the forums if you wanted to download. There should be an NBlend file, some textures and assets for you guys. So let's get, so depth, there's really not big difference between after 8. So some of the presets you'll see will have 12, but there's not really a noticeable difference between after 8. So I always just keep it at 8. Dimension I set to a 1 or a 0.9, and dimension controls the sharpness or controls the roughness of your sharp areas. And then lacunarity, I think is how you say it, I set that to 2.5, which is just another adjustment to the noise. Offset usually controls the height of everything, so you could think of it as like the contrast of like the noise texture. So like if we were to look at this again, you'd be like bumping the whites and creating more contrast within that image that it's computing. So I left my offset at a 0.75 because we're creating a foreground first. And then my distortion was a 1.45. I also really recommend you guys experiment with this add-on too. It's like the best way to start learning it. And what's important with like this experimental phase in the beginning is that you just want to get the main shape and like proportions of a landscape, and don't worry about detail because it'll come later. So then I set my height here to a 0.5 to bring it up. Offset again as a 0.05. And I adjusted the strata, which is a 1.5. And strata just adds another layer to your landscapes. You won't see it very well on this one, but see if, oh yeah, I guess you can. So that's like a smooth one. But if you had a mountain, it literally put almost like stairs onto it. So you could really create some awesome like sci-fi environments and stuff with this tool. And then fall off is how you see how it's almost like a circle around this texture here. So you could just take it off, or you can have it fall off on one direction too. So here now is, I think, a good foreground piece that we're going to work with. And sometimes you end up with like artifacts like this where it's like sticking up, and you can kind of adjust it to like in the editor yourself, or you could just, since these are high density meshes, that you can actually just go in and go into sculpt mode and just smooth it out yourself. So we'll do that. And then go to object mode. Oh, also too, like a good thing to know is if you accidentally click off of it before you're ready to like move on from your landscape, it will always save the last presets you had. So it's really handy for that. So we'll just have to smooth that back out again. I think that looks good. And then this is like the part where I start like looking for a good eye on like a camera. Like a good view of where you want to put it. So also it's a good tool that the A&T landscape gives you. So you should have a create tab now on if you open up the end menu, and it'll do your landscape tools, and you could create a slope, a weight from the slope, which this a lot of this stuff is a lot more apparent when you're making like mountains and stuff, so it's a lot more easily to see. But this landscape eroder creates some really awesome weight maps that you can use for your particle systems later. So I usually keep it at one iteration just because it takes a lot for your computer to process it. So now if you look, it's generated a bunch of vertex groups for us. So I always like the rain map or the water weight maps for doing grass and rocks and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool what it ends up generating for you. But yeah, if you have a mountain, it's a lot more apparent what, like you could see where the water would flow and where it would settle and all that stuff. It's really cool. So back to object mode. Let's go ahead. Oh, that's right. Let's go to edit mode, and in edit mode, you'll notice that these landscapes get created with triangle faces, and we don't like triangles usually. It's best practice, I've always heard, to just always have, always try to have quads. So just select everything and then do Alt J, and that will do tries to quads. And then also it's important to remember to unwrap, because that'll be important for when we start texturing. And it'll take a while too. Again, it's a very high dense mesh. And also if you guys can't follow with like your computer, if your computer's struggling with this stuff, you could always just scale down a little bit more than what I'm doing. And then it's all just, really environments are perspective. So it's really, you could still end up making environments that just might be at a small scale, if that makes sense. So continuing on, it's unwrapped now. Now we can add a camera. Whoa. Why is it huge? Oh. And then, oh, that's why. All right. Actually, I'm not gonna have the camera. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. We are going to scale this up now to the size of landscape. So let's do on the X and Y scale 150, and on the Z scale we are going to do 175. So now you're going to notice that there's some clipping going on in your view. So just go to view and bump the clipping up to like 100,000 meters. That way you don't have to adjust it later. And then make your start at 1 meter. We're going to have to do that for the camera as well too. So once we add that in. So now let's add in that camera. And then you drag it up, scale it now because you need to be able to see it. And I was like, you'll always end up editing like your view on everything. It's always about like finding the right spot. And there's nothing wrong about changing it. So now let's go ahead and just move it over. And then when I'm moving a camera too, I always like to have the second window open to be able to like see where it's actually going to be. So now we can just move stuff this way. Okay. So now let's move the camera back a little bit so we can get a perspective on it. Alright, so that looks pretty good. So now, when you look at this, we can make adjustments to our mesh now. And what we can do is just make sure that there's no like visible edge seam, like super corner edge seam, if that makes sense, on the edge of the foreground here, because you don't want like a corner sticking up or anything like that. But this is looking pretty good so far, but let's try and drop this down a little bit. So in edit mode, go to vertex and just select like any area of your mesh, and then make sure proportional editing's turned on. And then just go ahead and start editing it a little bit. You can move stuff around a little easy with the proportional editing. As we adjust this. Trying to just get it to where it's good good setup for like your camera to be able to like see into the distance and all that. So maybe we could pull up the camera again. Like that, yeah, I like that one. So back to edit mode, we're gonna try and bring up this so it meets your mid-ground mountains a little more. I think that's good for now. So now we can add a little extra detail too with the displacement modifier. So go to add modifier, deform, displace. Oof. Oh, that's why, okay. We forgot to apply the scale. Always apply your scale. And then add the modifier. And then go to texture, new. Now what I did in the files I provided you, I used the snow displacement. So it just adds another layer of like texture to the mesh. Make it a non-color since it's only black and white. Mapping, I did a 4x4. And then you won't notice a big change right now because the modifier is set to local coordinates. Switch that to UV. And this is a good way to like add more like textures to your landscapes if you ever need to. I kept the strength at like a 1.2. So now we could start adding textures. Oh, let's actually hit this too with another subdiv and put that above the displace modifier. So now we can start adding textures. And before we start adding textures, let's switch to render view and turn off the scene world. And I always like using the sunset preset built into Blender. And then you just want to rotate and adjust the strength to the lighting that you like. Like that right there. So let's leave it there for now. We can start adding in textures. So pull this up, then switch this just to your shader editor. Add a new shader, and this is where the node wrangler is going to come in handy. So just click on the principal BSDF, Control Shift T, and let's open up the ground texture, or any, you guys could use any textures you want. So I use the color, the normal, and the roughness. That's all we really need. And then we're gonna, let's, before too, for environments, I like to use 1K and 2K textures. You're more than welcome to use the 4K and 8K, but just always remember that takes up a lot of memory, and then you're sacrificing render time as well. So I usually use 1K or 2K textures, and I usually use ambient CG for textures and HDRIs. So we can go ahead and scale up this texture to 15, and then we can group this by selecting everything and doing Control J. Click your node tab and always try to keep everything organized. So I'm labeling it ground. And now we can take this principal BSDF, Shift D, duplicate it, and then Alt P to remove it from that group. And then we can do, again, Control Shift T, and let's add Rock 28. So just again, color, normal, and roughness. And then I think this ground is a little too bright, actually. So we could add in a RGB curves node here. And we can bump that contrast up a little bit. All right. So now we could go ahead and view this by doing Control Shift and left mouse button just to view things quickly. And I scaled this one up to 20, I believe. Or no, 30. And then let's go ahead and group this again too. Label it Rock 1. And now you can do a Control Shift and right mouse button drag over the two BSDFs like this, and it automatically will give you a mix shader. So now it's mixing your ground and your rock by 50-50. And to add even more detail, let's go ahead and add in another rock texture by doing Shift D, Alt P again. And then Control Shift T to add in our second rock texture, which is Rock 34. Roughness, normal, and color again. And then we can group that as Rock 2. And add another mix shader between these two, between the two rocks. So now your tiling won't look as apparent either for your ground texture. And now we can mix the ground and rock in a really cool way. So add, do a normal map. We'll need a normal and a color round too. So plug in the normal to the normal, and then dot to factor, and then color into factor here. And then just to see what's going on here, we could do the Control-Shift-Click on here. Let's increase this contrast to see what this texture is. So now you can see how this could become pretty useful for like a mount, like doing a snowtop mountain or something. And what's cool is you can adjust how much, and then you move this around to be able to adjust where you want it to be. And what you're telling it to do is for wherever white is, you're telling it, hey, I want the ground or rock texture, and then in the black, I want the rock texture. That's what I'm going for. So now let's do Control-Shift-Click to view this. I think that's looking pretty good. You could see how the ground texture here is being mixed with like the two rock textures. And you can always rotate your textures too. I also think I need to scale that up, yeah. So let's scale this up to 20. And I rotated on the Z by 20 degrees as well. Now is a good time too to start finding assets like grass, rocks, whatever. If you notice in the real world, like environments are filled with layers. It's always layers, layers. So there's the ground, there's dirt, there's rock, there's grass, and then there's like the dead leaves, there's sticks, twigs, and then there's trees. So I just always think about layers. But it's just like any other art too. It's like you can go overboard at some point. So just be mindful of that as well. So get inspired, make your own reference boards. Also too, you could get those assets. Like I provided some rock, grass, bushes, I think a flower, and a couple trees too. So what we can do now is append the asset blend file. So it's this rock, grass, flower right here. Collections, and do all the assets. And you probably want to grab them to be able to move off screen like that. And we can start our first particle system. I don't know if anyone's done particle systems before. Sometimes they're scary. This one will not be, I promise. So we can start by doing select your foreground, do particle system, a new particle. Label your particle system grass. And then you also have to label the particle setting too, because that's what it's saving. And then make it a hair system. Check advanced. So that way we can mess with the rotation on it. Not viewport, let's do render. Collections, and then in collections, select that grass one and object rotation. Bump that scale up to 7. So now you can start seeing it, but they're all a little wonky because of the rotation on it. So we need the rotation to be the object's Y. That's good. And then we can start adding, we could add a children to it, interpolated. I did 20 in both. And you can always lower the display if like your system's lagging. You can lower this, but then your render amount will be at 20. So it's always good to check every once in a while what your render amount is. That way you know what is being in the camera, what is going to be in the camera. So then go to vertex groups, and for density, this is where we get those weight maps that we got. So we could try different weight maps and see what we like. I do like the rain map on that. You can see what the water one looks like too. Yeah, that's not too bad either. Let's go with the rain map, because that's looking pretty good. And now is when I usually switch my camera to cycles because you need to be able to see uh, what everything's going to actually render as. So if you can, GPU settings or GPU compute. I always keep my viewport low at like 150 samples, and then I'll render usually at 512 samples. Denoise is usually optics. Add some motion blur. Performance, this will make sense more when you render, but change your tile sizing to 512 because then it'll take more time in each section of your render, and it'll look a lot better, I promise. Color management, I always love the look of medium high contrast. I think that should be it for now. Oh, let's adjust our camera size. So for large scale landscapes, I always find it better to have 2560 by 1080 because it's more of a wide screen epic shot. So usually do that. Now we can start adding some midground pieces, and we can add in the sky texture too. So instead of using this, let's start adding actual lighting to our scene. So in the world setting, click the color here, color, sky setting, or what's it, sky texture. And then this is always super strong, I don't know why, but we want it to be at like a 0.15. 0.15. And then I had started with elevation at 12 degrees and rotation at a -85, and we'll see what that is. Oh yeah, that looks good. We could probably rotate it a little more too. That way we get some more shadows in our shot. There we go. Yeah, that looks better. Alright, and so you don't want that background piece or that texture in the background. You just want the light from it. So go to film and mark it as transparent. And now we can start adding in those midground pieces. So for the midground piece, what I did, and you might need to start switching back and forth between render view and viewport. So for this first midground piece, let's make sure we're adding it to this. We could close assets. For the first landscape piece, do the same thing. Mesh, landscape. And for this one, I did I believe it was Mountain 1, subdivs of 256. Mesh, I did a 4x2. 4x2. Random seed, or I did the hybrid factor. Yeah, there we go. Random seed was 6. Noise size 0.75. Let's adjust the lacunarity. Can never pronounce that right. 2.24. And then we'll do the gain of 1.93. That way it's a little smoother for like our hills here. And then height I set to a 0.47. Offset was 0.22. And then for the dimensions of this, I had it at 797 by 297 by 132. So now we got this big old piece here. All you gotta do is place it into your scene. But you also want to remember too to do the same thing of go into edit mode, select all your faces, Alt J, and then also unwrap it too, because you need that for texturing these as well. We're doing pretty good on time right now, still 2. Alright, so now you can see that the clipping error is happening in your camera. So select your camera, adjust your clip end to also the 100,000, and start at 1 meter. So now you could start adding in some of this stuff. The key too is, again, just having your reference, knowing what you're wanting to do, and then you're gonna always adjust your camera shot, whether you want it lower down. So I also want to be able to get the sky into this. So that's a pretty good right there. So again, just placement of stuff, and then also apply your scale too. I always forget to do that. But yeah, you find just an angle that you like on it. You could scale it ways that you need to. And then also rotate it to where you won't have those edge seams showing. But you could also, if you can't help it, you could just go into edit mode and do the same thing. Just grab one of these vertex, make sure your proportional editing's on, and you can manually do it. So I like the look of that there. And then just to save time, we'll Shift D, reset the rotation on it. Scale it up on the Z a little bit. You can scale it down on the X. Oh, not that much. Alright, so now let's move forward with this. There we go, that's a pretty good mid-ground right there, if you ask me. Alright, so now you want to start texturing it in a similar way, just to save time. We're going to just reuse the ground texture for this last one, which was the material 01. But I would recommend you adjust, like make a copy of this and then adjust the scales of those textures as well, because everything's different at a further distance, like the perspective on it. So you'd probably need to make those like larger, that way there's smaller details in them. But for this, it's fine for now. And now is a good time too to make sure that when you do particle systems and you're messing with like weight maps, always make sure your particles are where your camera's viewing. You don't want to like have your computer running a bunch of particles over here when it's not even going to be rendered. So usually what I have to do is turn off the particle system. And you can turn off your particle system in the viewport like that to save power on your computer if you need to be able to edit more. So what you do is just pull up the weight paint, and we use the rain map, I believe, for ours. Yes, okay. So all you gotta do in weight paint mode is click the gradient tool, throw that weight to 0, and now you should be able to just pull it up to where it's not gonna be visible. So like I don't need particles here. And then it's gonna be able to move your particles to fill in more space too, which is nice. So now if you look, now that's saving a whole lot. Alright, now we look through the render view. It's looking good. And just to make sure I show you guys how to make your own like weight maps for particles, we can go ahead and start that. So for like let's set up a tree particle system for the foreground. So what you can do to create your own weight maps, all you got to do is go to weight paint, vertex groups, add a new one, and I'm going to label this trees. And try and just paint where you want them, where you want trees to be, and make sure it's in the camera view. But you can also do the gradient tool to take out like what's not in camera view. So for this, let's go back to our brush and tool. And for environments, I like to always add a little jitter to, where's it at? Oh, stroke, there we go. I like to add jitter to it to make it a little more organic, because like usually things don't grow in perfect, like perfect rows or anything like that, unless it's like a farm. But like in a real world setting, you wouldn't see I don't even know what I was about to say. But anyway, so now we can take out some of this because I know we won't need that. And then now that we have our own, oh wait, let's not paint right in front of the camera like that. I want to create like a walkway almost. Alright, so now we can add in a tree particle system. So label this one tree. And then we can reuse this grass one and duplicate it, but just now label it tree. Switch the collection to tree. And we certainly don't need them to be scale 7.75, should do. .75, and it also does not need children. We'll probably do 200 trees. And density of the tree texture. Okay, so that's not looking too bad. Definitely can move stuff around though. because we want to have a clear view into the background and what I got planned for that. So let's go ahead, and you'll notice since I didn't disable the particle system, it's lagging a little bit here. So just want to delete some of that, and then we can add in some too. And I'm liking that. It's not looking too bad, and now as you go too, you can notice that now you can kind of move stuff into different ways because the trees are blocking certain things. But always be aware of where it's ending up. So instead we can scale it on the Z and then drop it down. See, that's looking pretty good so far. So now you got a tree and a grass particle system for your foreground. Then when you look through it in the render view, it's looking gorgeous. Gorgeous. So now let's go ahead and add some randomization to the particle systems. So in the grass, you probably want to add some randomization, just a little bit, to like the rotation, so like a 0.2 maybe. Nah, that's too much. 0.05. Yeah, there we go. 0.05 on that. And then for scale, did a 0.25, right? Scale randomization? Yeah. And then trees, random rotation, 0.05. No, that's too much. Is it? Nah, 0.02. Alright, and then the scale randomization for those two. Let's do 0.2. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. And then you could also just keep reusing your particle system, just duplicate it, and then just switch your vertex group and the collection for what you're needing. And we can go ahead and add in the background city real quick. Yeah, because I need to hurry up a little bit now. Alright, so let's go ahead and add in the city. I always like using the city that's in Blender Kit. It is a Manhattan model. And it is free. It is somewhere around here. There it is. Throw that in. This is what's in the background of that picture that I rendered for the class. And then select this Manhattan. Scale it up. Bring it to the back. And then go back to your camera view, that way you can see everything. And then you just find where you would like to set it. So now it looks like there's a city off into the distance. And we should actually bring this back more. So like that. And then these could even be brought back maybe a little bit too. So now we can move stuff around. It's always, again, always adjusting stuff, always trying to find the right angle on everything. And now at this point, I could show you guys a good trick for atmosphere layers. So for an atmosphere layer, all you gotta do is add in a plane, and then RX90, add a new texture to this, and then for the texture, add in a gradient texture. Plug this into the alpha and map it. So Control T on the gradient texture. And then you want to increase the roughness to 1 and make your specular 0. Rotate at 90 on the Z. So now you should be seeing it somewhere. We can add orange color to it. I just gotta find where the light's hitting. Oops. Okay. Anyway. So rotate on the Z90. Oh, wait, we don't want that. 0. Rotate on the Z90, not on the scale. Jeez. And then you want to push it up on the X now. And you can see how this gradient's forming here. But it's just for like an atmospheric layer. And it looks better once light's hitting it. So then you want to just back out, scale that sucker up. Yeah, see, now you can see it. Alright, and then what I do is I divide my foreground, midground, and background with these atmospheric layers. And you can see kind of what it's doing. And then all you gotta do is just Shift D and separate it for the background. And then you'll scale that one up too. And then just to wrap it all in for the scene, Shift A, add an image as plane for the sky. And that will be in the assets too. I gave you guys a few different sky options. So I'm gonna go with the sunset just because that's what we've been working with. And let's scale that up. And for this, all you gotta do is plug the color into the emission and raise the strength to 1. Throw it in the background. What you can do is rotate it too to like tilt it towards you, so it gives that perspective of like a horizon. So now when you're looking at everything, you got each individual atmospheric layer that's dividing this midground here and the background. So the background's even more blurred out, so it looks more realistic this way. And this would probably be the time to like start adding, like finishing up your foreground. So adding rocks, flowers, anything you'd like to do for that. So I think this is probably going to be a good place for us to stop this session for today. Next week I'll be hosting again, so we can get into more details and like adding clouds and uh, animating some stuff. Maybe we'll see. I want to get a feel for what people want to do, so please let me know. Message me on Twitter or Discord. Just let me know what you want to see or what you'd like to learn about as far as environment design goes for the next session. All right, thank you all for coming.
And that's a wrap. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content. See you in our next maker session.